Okay, you guys, let's read a book tonight. Here's the gum I'm chewing tonight, by the way. Wrigley's Double Mint Chewing Gum. And there's a fun book. Toys. Amazing Stories Behind Some Great Inventions by Dawn Wulffson and illustrations by Laurie, Keller. Did you know that each year Rhino Train produces more than 1 million engines and cabooses and other railroad cars? If hitched together, they would make a toy train about 50 miles long. Did you know that King Louis XIV, Napoleon, and Queen Victoria all had collections of wind-up toys? And did you know that in the late 19th century, France, more than 5 million tin soldiers were made from discarded sardine containers? And did you know that the youngest international champion of table tennis was 8-year-old Joy Foster of Jamaica? And did you know that Play-Doh was originally only came in white? That's a good reason for this because it started out as a product for cleaning wallpaper. Let's read. Let's have fun tonight to read this book. I'm going to save my crinkling and my hairbrush, and my crinkling and my water bottle spray for the end of the video if you're awake. But hopefully you can fall asleep right away. Okay. Have you ever wondered who invented Mr. Potato Head, Lego, and the bicycle or remote control cars? Here are the fascinating stories behind these toy inventions and many others. Learn why kites were popular in ancient China and how the Slinky was used during the Vietnam War, and the reason Raggedy Ann has a red heart that says I love you on her chest. From dolls and checkers to pinball and the modern video game, there's a wide selection for both boys and girls to pore over. With humor and wit, this intriguing book serves up slices of cultural history that may just inspire young readers to think up their own inventions. And that was written by the Junior Library Guild. Amazing Stories Behind Great Inventions. Dawn Wulffson. Illustrated Laurie, Keller. And by the Henry Holt and Company printers out of New York. And for Barbara and Will, with love. Many thanks to Christy Ottaviano and Jane Jordan Brown for making this book possible, to my wife Pamela for her untiring love and support, and to Christian Galu for his invaluable research and assistance. So this was Henry and Holt. They've been publishers since 1866 out of New York City, New York. And this book is published in year 2000. Cool. And Slinky, they have a bunch of toys. It looks like the first one is going to be the Slinky. That should be fun. Introduction. Play-Doh began as a product for cleaning wallpaper. The seesaw was first used as a prop in the bloody spectacle in arenas of ancient Rome. Long ago, there were kites so large that people could be flown on them. Behind every toy, there is a story. But some toys have far stranger stories than others. Only those toys that had the most surprising and unbelievable origins are found in this book. That should be fun. Even though we know generally where and when a given toy was made, the chapters of this book are not in chronological order because there are all sorts of ways in which toys and their histories overlap. For example, toys have been around much longer than today's action figures, but action figures are a type of doll, and dolls were invented thousands of years before. Oh, excuse me, I read that whole thing wrong. For example, tops, T-O-P-S, have been around much longer than today's action figures, but action figures are a type of doll, and dolls were invented thousands of years before tops. So, really, there is no way to put the history of toys into a simplified order. In 1976, a time capsule was buried in Washington, D.C. Inside of that capsule are dozens of toys from the last century. In 2076, exactly 100 years later, it will be opened. People will marvel at the wonderful jumble of toys and see how we lived, how we dressed, and what we believed. Just as we are now, they will be amused and surprised by the toys they will find, and from them they will try to better understand the past. Very cool. I hope you guys will enjoy this tonight. Do you guys like history? I like it. This is kind of like a little toy history book. Okay, the Slinky. It was a mistake, a goof up, an invention that didn't work, a flop. That's what the Slinky was, at least in the very beginning. In 1945, an engineer by the name of Richard James was hard at work in a Philadelphia shipyard. The U.S. Navy had hired him to invent a stabilizing device for its ships. When a ship is plowing through the waves at sea, it pitches and plunges and rocks every which way. And its navigational instruments do too. Richard's job was to come up with something that would counterbalance the instruments so that they would be level at all times. Springs. Richard believed that some sort of arrangement of springs would do the trick. He tried all different types and sizes of springs, and he put them together in every conceivable way. For weeks he toiled, making dozens of different devices, but none of them worked at all. In fact, he never did come up with the item that the Navy had hired him to invent. But one day, Richard accidentally knocked a large experimental spring off the shelf. Excuse me. It should have just plopped on the floor, but instead it walked down and it crawled really, coil by coil, end over end. It descended into a stack of books. Oh my goodness. This is a good story. And then it went down to the desktop, down to a chair, and from there down to the floor, where it gathered itself all back together again. He tried it again. Each time, the same thing happened. Look at the cute little picture they have. Can you imagine the discovery? See it? He had it up here. And it fell down here. And it fell down here. And then fell to check. And then done. Oh my. How cool is that? To be the guy that saw that for the very first time. That is very cool. Okay. He tried it again and again, and each time it did the same thing. As soon as the workday was over, Richard hurried home. Fascinated with the strange spring, he showed his wife Betty what it could do. Together, they tried it out in all sorts of ways and in all sorts of places. It was especially good at walking down the stairs. A toy. Richard didn't think of it that way, but Betty did. She was the one who realized that her husband had invented what her husband had invented was a terrific toy. Betty was also the one who named it. Way to go, Betty. At first, all sorts of names came to mind, but none of them seemed quite right. For the next 2 days, she thumbed through a dictionary, keeping a list of some of the best possibilities. Then, finally, she came up with what she believed was the perfect word to describe this toy. Slinky. Isn't this cool? Early the next year, Betty and Richard James borrowed $500 to have 400 Slinkies made. They went from store to store trying to get the owners to stock them. A few of the store owners did, but despite Slinky's wonderful ability to walk, it didn't move off the shelves. Not a single one was bought. Richard and Betty were so discouraged, but they were not about to give up. Slinky was a super toy. They were sure of it, and it would sell, but people needed to be shown what it could do. They went to the manager of a large department store named Gimbel's. Oh my goodness, Gimbel's. I've never been in a Gimbel's, but is that the same Gimbel's that was like in the Santa Claus movie Miracle on 34th Street? Was it Macy's and Gimbel's were at odds? Oh my goodness, you guys, I am loving this book. So, it took a lot of talking, even a little begging, but finally they convinced the manager of Gimbel's to let them put on a demonstration. Fearing the worst, Richard slipped $1 to a friend to make sure at least one Slinky would be sold. Oh, sneaky. It turned out, though, that he had no need to worry, because shoppers stared in amazement as the steel coil gracefully walked down a sloped board. Within 90 minutes, the entire stock of 400 Slinkies had been sold. Now, this was in 1945, right? How cool is that? Before long, Richard and Betty were able to start their own company. Within a few years, they were millionaires. I'm getting goosebumps. I love those kind of stories. Oh my God. It gives me goosebumps. This is such a good story. As for Slinky, 250 million Slinkies have been sold to date. Now, that was obviously in the year 2000. And Slinky sales are as strong today as ever. In the world of toys, Slinky still walks that walk and shows no sign of ever slowing down. The early Slinkies were made of blue-black Swedish steel. In the first year of production, this material was replaced with less expensive American metal. At $2 a piece, a Slinky costs only twice what it did 50 years ago. There are about 80 feet of wire in a standard size Slinky. During the Vietnam War, in the 60s and 70s, the Slinky reverted to its original role. First intended for the military, Slinky the toy ended up on the battlefield. Carried by radio men in the jungles of Vietnam, Slinkies were tossed over high tree branches as makeshift antennas. Very cool. It takes approximately 10 seconds to manufacture one Slinky. Slinkies make good scarecrows. After seeds have been planted, try hanging a Slinky on a nearby branch. With the slightest breeze, it will dance around and the birds will stay away. That's a good idea. Slinky's most recent accomplishment was in outer space. Bunches have gone aboard space shuttles, and the purpose is to test the effects of zero gravity on springs. Oh my goodness. Are you guys enjoying this? Next, the Seesaw. Some inventions popped up in different parts of the world at different times, but nobody knows for sure when or where they first originated. One of these is the seesaw. The Polynesians and the Egyptians and the Germans and Greeks and Chinese all had versions of their own seesaw, or teeter-totter, as it's also called. The Romans were the first, however, to set down any written record of the seesaw. Seesaws, it seems, were used in ancient Rome circuses, which had very violent exhibitions. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine? Boxing matches to the death, crucifixions, military battles in which soldiers actually killed each other. These were all part of the Roman circus events. That's terrible. Almost every act was brutal. Oh my goodness. And that goes for their seesaw act as well. And here's how it worked. In the middle of the arena, a large seesaw was set up. At either end of the device was a basket big enough to hold a man. The two clowns were then shoved into the arena. As fast as they could, they ran to the seesaw and hopped into the baskets. Just as a lion was set free from a cage, the lion, which hadn't been fed for days, I know this scenario. The lion charges the seesaw. When it came toward one of the clowns, he would push off the ground and up into the air. Then the animal would race toward the other clown in the other basket on the ground, and the clown would immediately push off and shoot up out of reach of the ravenous lion. Up and down they would go, and the spectators thought this was great fun. For the clowns, however, it wasn't fun at all, because eventually they would get tired. One would sadly end up as a basket of food for the lion. That is crazy. Oh my goodness. The next time you're on a seesaw, you might want to think about how it was once used and be glad you're just clowning around. and not a clown in the actual seesaw act of the Roman circus. The longest that two people have seesawed in 820 hours. The record was set by Charles Ryan and Philip Deet of Theodore High School at Theodore, Alabama, February 23rd through March 28th in 1976. Interesting, because you remember the Brady Bunch in the 70s. Little Bobby and Cindy tried to do a seesaw, break the record. Remember that? Late 60s or early 70s. Anyways, they didn't make it because they fell asleep. The original meaning of the word seesaw was back and forth, and the original meaning of the word clown was peasant. Oh my goodness. That was interesting. Next, Lego. It should be good. I don't play with Legos, but it's interesting to look at the things they make. Lego. The Great Depression of 1929 put people out of work all around the world. One such person was Ole Kirk Christensen. Maybe his name is Ollie, O-L-E. I'm going to call him Ollie. Ollie Kirk Christensen. And he lived in the little town of Billund, Denmark. Mr. Christensen was a carpenter, but unfortunately there was little work to be found. By 1932, he still did not have a steady job. To make ends meet, Christensen began handcrafting such things as wooden ironing boards, step ladders, wheelbarrows, and toys. Then, with his wife and son, he would travel the countryside to sell his products to local farmers. When the Depression finally started to ease up, most people returned to their old jobs. But Christensen had become very skilled at crafting wooden toys, especially animal pull toys, and there was great demand for them now. He realized that he could make more money creating toys than he could building houses. Besides, he enjoyed the work more. Having decided to go into the toy business full-time, Christensen opened his own company. He combined two Danish words, leg and goat, which means play well, in naming his new toy Lego. Christensen may not have known it, but Lego is also a Latin word, and one with a very appropriate meaning. In Latin, Lego means I put together. Oh my goodness, isn't that interesting? When the Lego company opened its doors for business in 1932, no Legos were made there, for the simple reason that they hadn't been invented yet. At first, Christensen and his employees made only wooden toys such as dolls, blocks, hobby horses, and marionettes. After a year of operation, they began making plastic toys as well. One day, Christensen whittled some clever new building blocks. What made them unique was that they interlocked. Kids would really like these blocks, he felt for sure, but he knew it would be both difficult and expensive to mass produce wooden ones. Right away, he realized the blocks could be produced much faster and cheaper using plastic instead of wood. In 1949, Christensen came out with what he called automatic binding bricks. The sets were in two colors, red and white. As they do today, the blocks had studs on top, were hollow underneath, and could be easily stacked and locked together. In Europe, the toy was a hit from the get-go. Soon, buyers were telling shopkeepers that they wanted more colors. Green, yellow, and blue blocks were then added. At the suggestion of his son, Godfried, Ollie renamed the products Lego bricks, which eventually became just Legos. 5 years later, so that would be 1954, Ollie and Gottfried improved their product, and tubes were added, which gave kids many new and interesting ways to connect the blocks. In the original 1949 version, the bricks could only be stacked directly on top of one another. Now, 2 8-studded bricks could be joined in 24 different ways. 6 8-studded bricks could be combined in over 1 million ways. Oh my goodness, this is so interesting, you guys. By the end of the 1950s, Legos had become one of the most popular toys in Europe, but not until 1961 did the toy finally reach the United States. Why it took so long for the product to reach the United States, no one really knows, but by the early 1970s, it was one of the best-loved and best-selling items in America also. Presently, Legos are manufactured in hundreds of different sets. Some sets just contain the basics, building block and connecting tubes. Others come complete with a wide variety of items for play, such as small cars, roadways, ramps, roofs, and even city maps. It's a whole little world unto itself, and perhaps, best of all, it's a world that you create. Oh my goodness, you guys, I get goosebumps. I love these little toy stories. Alright, let's see. Legos are made of a plastic called ABS, acrylonitrile butadiene styrene. I really demolished that word, but we'll just call it ABS. During the manufacturing process, the plastic is heated to the consistency of bread dough. It is then pressed into models, cooled, and ejected, all in about 10 seconds. The process for making Legos is now almost mistake-free. Out of every 1 million Legos that are made, an average of only 26 are rejected. Today, the Lego company produces over 1,700 different shaped bricks, and they come in almost every color imaginable. In Billion, Denmark, Carlsbad, California, and Windsor, England, Legoland parks exist. In addition to the usual rides and attractions, there are numerous buildings and other structures, all constructed of Legos. No special pieces are used. All the Legos come from the same sets found in toy stores. The only difference is that the pieces are glued together. Oh, thank goodness for that, right? Between 1949 and 1998, more than 2,003 billion Lego building blocks were produced. This is amazing. In 1969, the first official Lego World Cup Building Championship was held in Billund, Denmark, with 38 children from 14 different countries who participated. So if up till 1998, 203 billion Legos were produced. That was up in 1998. This is 2016, so we're talking 18 years later. Can you imagine? 230 billion. Can you imagine having 230 billion views on YouTube? How cool is that? Good story. Okay, so next we have tops. Tops. Are you guys still awake? People have been doing it for thousands of years, and they haven't tried of it yet, spinning tops. The oldest tops were discovered in Babylonia in the 19th century. On expeditions in the Middle East, archaeologists opened 3,000-year-old coffins. Inside were human remains, and with the remains were handmade objects of every kind. Possessions the person most enjoyed in life. The children were buried with their favorite toys. For many, these included tops. The tops were made of clay, either solid or hollow. Etched and painted on the sides were pictures, usually of animals. From Babylonia, tops made their way to many other countries such as Greece, India, and Russia. But it was in Japan that the art of top making blossomed. The ancient Japanese painted tops with clever designs so that when they were spun, all sorts of wild, intricate images appeared. The Japanese were the first to put holes in clay tops, which made them hum and whistle as they whirled. Another Japanese innovation was putting tiny lanterns in tops. Spinning in the dark of the night, the tops filled a room with lights and shadows that danced across the walls. The Maori, the original people of New Zealand, invented a top called a potaka. These tops, often beautifully inlaid with shells, were pointed at both ends and spun with a flick of a whip. The Maori were so skilled that they could use the whip to stop the top and then set it spinning in reverse. Cool. That's amazing. Another Maori top was the potaka takiri, which made a screaming, wailing sound when spun. These noisy tops had two special uses. Dozens were sent spinning at funerals, sounding like the whole world was crying for the person who had died. Maori warriors also used them when going into battle. Before they attacked, their potaka takiri was set into motion. The screaming and howling unnerved the enemy and sent a clear warning. You are in great danger. How cool is this? I have no idea. And then here they are. Here they are. It says, do you hear that sound? You mean that cute little birdie chirping on the rooftop? That's kind of funny. And then, perhaps the most unusual tops were those used in Europe in the Middle Ages. In many villages, there was a single enormous wooden top about the size of a person. Sometimes, especially on icy cold mornings, a group of villagers would come together and set the top spinning by slapping the sides with their hands. Why? For one thing, The physical exertion helped everybody warm up. Besides, it was good fun and a great way to start the day. Oh my goodness. Top comes from a Dutch word meaning to whirl. The gyroscope, a type of top invented in 1810, is used to keep ships and planes level while moving. Tops, especially gyroscopes, helped scientists better understand the rotation of the Earth. When dice were outlawed for a time in Rome, people used numbered six-sided tops instead. Playing with a four-sided top called a dreidel is a Hanukkah tradition. Each side has a Hebrew letter, and the letter on which the dreidel falls determines if the player wins a prize or not. Oh my goodness. I really enjoyed this about the top. I didn't think I was going to like it. I thought it was going to be boring. I am just loving this book. Oh my goodness, Mr. Potato Head is next. We've already gone for 36 minutes. Oh, let's do Mr. Potato Head. Can we do? Oh my goodness. I had no idea this was going to go this long, but I'm loving it. Mr. Potato Head. Straw wrappers poofed into orbit and black olives on the ends of little fingers. Green peas flicked across the table. As a parent, George Lerner had seen every trick, every stunt, and every possible way a child can play with food. And there didn't seem to be any hope of stopping the antics. Begging, yelling, scolding, reasoning, punishing. So far, nothing had worked. Then it happened. One night, right in the middle of mealtime, monkey business, George suddenly had an idea. Instead of trying to get his kids to stop playing with their food, he'd play with his food too, only he would do it in a more civilized manner. After gathering bits of junk from around the house, George grabbed a few potatoes and joined his kids at the table. Into a potato went 2 bottle caps for eyes. A row of thumbtacks made a metal mouth, and a strawberry on a toothpick made a silly clown-like nose. Bingo! Just like that, George went from grumpy old spoiler of the table time fun to the leader of the gang. In 1950, George Lerner was a model maker at a toy manufacturing company. After his brainstorm, he started molding all kinds of plastic doodads. Eyes, ears, noses, hats, mouths, and mustaches, with sharp little prongs in the back. They could be stuck into different kinds of fruits and vegetables, potatoes being the best to create funny faces. Over and over, George Lerner tried to sell his funny faces for food kit to toy companies, but none of them were interested. More than 2 years passed before a breakfast food company bought George's idea. Their plan was to make little packages of the funny faces pieces and give them away as premiums in the cereal boxes. George signed a contract selling his idea for $5,000. Now this was back in, when was this? 1950. So that's a good idea. Oh my goodness. Look at this cereal. Corneos. They call it Corneos. At first, first, George thought he had made a good deal, but then several months later, he got a phone call from the owner of Hasbro Industries, a toy company that specializes in making play doctors and play nurses kits. The owners, Henry Hasselfeld and his son Merrill, had seen the Funny Faces cereal box premium toy, and they wanted to talk with George. Henry and Merrill Hasselfeld told George how much they liked his idea. They explained that the company wanted to expand its product line and that his toy was just the sort of thing that they were looking for. They wanted to buy the idea and form a partnership with George. But there was one problem, a big problem. George explained that he had sold all the rights to the cereal company. Oh my goodness. Henry moaned and Merrill groaned. But the father-son team didn't let the matter drop. They contacted the cereal company and made them a terrific offer. George would get back the $5,000 and the Hasbro company would add another $2,000. An agreement was quickly reached for a total sum of $7,000, and the cereal company sold the rights to George Lerner, who then went into partnership with Merrill and Henry Hasselfeld. George went on to become a millionaire, and so did the Hasselfelds. As for the product, it got a new name, Mr. Potato Head. A year later, Mr. Potato Head came along with then eventually daughter Yam and son Spud. For the next part, for the most part, they're a very happy family, except sometimes the kids play with their food. Oh my goodness. Mr. Potato Head was the first toy ever advertised on television. Oh my goodness. In 1964, the Hasbro company began supplying a plastic potato with each kit. Face parts are now 5 times larger than the originals made by George Lerner. In 1987, Mr. Potato Head's pipe was taken away from him and a big deal was made over it. Over his decision to quit. At a ceremony at the White House, his pipe was handed over to the Surgeon General of the United States. Oh my goodness, you guys. We're going to stop there for today. I have enjoyed reading this book, this toy book. I can't believe it. I knew I was going to like it, but I didn't know I was going to like it that much. Yes, that will definitely be a part 2. Probably a